Let's bring in my good friend now, Sky News contributor, podcast host, extraordinary, wonderful WA woman. There you go, all of that, Jane Marwick in Perth.
Oh, thank you.
I couldn't believe the story of Sarah. I know you can't. No. I couldn't believe the story of Mark, the dying dad in Brisbane, those 4 beautiful little ones under the age of 13. This lack of compassion for Annastacia Palaszczuk disgusted me. She doubled down. I mean, it's been a really sad, pretty depressing 24 hours, I have to say, Jane.
It has. It's been horrendous. And look, congratulations to you. And I watched your editorial last night where you said you don't do these things lightly, but you picked up the phone and called Scott Morrison. Now, let's make one thing very clear. And this goes to Mark McGowan too, who's talking about shock jocks and things going on behind closed doors. My phone's been buzzing away. Annastacia Palaszczuk raised this in the Parliament. Scott Morrison did not go public about his call to Sarah. It was going to be private until Annastacia Palaszczuk raised it. Now, the word is, Peter, that Annastacia Palaszczuk coming out with these crocodile tears and saying that she's been bullied. I'm sorry, we're talking about a 26-year-old girl coming from a city that has had no cases, no community transmission for 60 days. So that meets her measure anyway for when borders come down. So this is completely nonsensical. Then the tears and saying, I've lost someone too. Well, look, the word is I'm hearing that it was her grandmother to whom she was very, very close. But I'm also hearing, and this is just the word at the moment, that the Premier was able to go to her grandmother's funeral. So I don't know why she's drawn this comparison. It doesn't, and I'm terribly sorry for the Premier if this is the case, if her grandmother in her 90s has died. That is completely irrelevant when you look at the case of Sarah and everything that has gone before it. And I do. Of course I do.
You know, but every empathy is human. But her loss doesn't negate Sarah's loss, and her loss doesn't trump Sarah's loss. And Sarah can't make the decisions. She makes the decisions. The Premier will actually, we know it's not the Premier, it's Jeanette Young, but the Premier's in the position to make the decisions, and she's got to actually put some of the emotion to one side. She makes the decision, and then she applies compassion. Well, what we saw was no application of compassion.
No, and we're seeing politicking, and I'm hearing from people in Queensland who are steadfast Labor supporters and voters that they are absolutely disgusted with the performance of the Premier over the last 24 hours. I also don't like her throwing Jeanette Young under the bus, to be really honest. Jeanette Young is not an elected official. Annastacia Palaszczuk is the team captain. She's the leader. People can see this for what it is. They can see that this is about the Queensland election, just as people are starting to see in Western Australia that it's about the Western Australian election. Look, we all understand these borders, but we cannot go past the fact that Sarah was in Canberra. She'd only been there since February, as you pointed out on your show, and there's no community transmission. So it's nonsensical. And I think, I watched Peter Gleeson last night. I think yesterday was the day that Annastacia Palaszczuk really put a nail in the coffin with regards to her being re-elected at the October election.
Yeah, well, he knows he's a good man in terms of analysis of Queensland politics. Let's move on to the next question, because I have to say I have seen more of these state chief health officers during this pandemic than I ever have seen any of them before. The bloke in Victoria, Brett Sutton, he's something of a cult figure if you're on the left. You might call him a media tart if you're on the right. He's a bit of a scapegoat, actually, this week of sorts for Daniel Andrews. Yeah. In Queensland, as we know, it's Jeanette Young. Now, clearly, as I said before, she's not just running health issues, she's also running economic issues. So back to Facebook, I wanted to ask this question. Do you think the too many premiers are hiding behind bureaucrats and not taking responsibility for the decisions we elect them to make? This is what you've had to say. Mary-Ann Drinkwater believes absolutely. I don't even know why we bother having premiers. It's obvious that the chief health officers are running the country. Shane Frank says, I'm absolutely amazed at how many of our so-called state leaders don't actually know who or on what basis information is guiding them to make these pivotal decisions. Graham Cook thinks the premiers are totally responsible for the bureaucrats on their watch. Chris Anderson says, lack of leadership during this pandemic has been the biggest issue, and a lack of accountability. If these states were corporations, the CEOs and boards would have them sacked. Pretty fair point.
Yeah. Yeah. All terrific feedback. I can't go any better than the respondents. People are seeing through this. We understood, and we cut premiers and the Prime Minister, and I've got some issues too with people trying to leave the country who need to leave the country, I have to say, but that's an issue for another day. But people are starting to see through this. We cut all of our premiers and leaders a lot of slack at the start of this pandemic, but hiding behind bureaucrats who are unelected officials is not washing, Peter, with the electorate.
I don't think so either. A new poll, Media Reach poll for the Victorian Liberal Party leadership out today says if the election was to be held this week, Victorians would boot Dan Andrews and his Labor Party out of power. Now, I'm using the term boot very deliberately there, Jane. I'd laugh at this Facebook event being hosted by Victoria Forward on Sunday. They're calling on Victorians to protest from home to give Dan the boot. I mean, given we can't go outdoors anywhere to protest, and we saw that poor woman in Ballarat even putting something up on Facebook, but close to 45,000 Victorians have shown interest. All you have to do here is put some boots outside, take a picture of them, give him the boot, post it up. It's all within the rules.
How many sets of pairs of boots are going to be on your balcony, Peta Credlin? Will they be appearing on your...
I got a few.
on your Facebook. You know, it's interesting though, I've got friends and family in Victoria who think Daniel Andrews is doing a wonderful job and who are still cutting him some slack. So I'll be interested to see if it's more than 45,000 pairs of boots that get put out on balconies and front doorsteps on Sunday.
Hey, I've got to go to this one. You're a journalist, you've been in the media a long time. Last night I spoke with the Australian's Victorian State reporter Rachel Baxter. Now, she has been hounded on social media for the sort of forensic questions she's asking Daniel Andrews in every one of those press conferences. She's had death threats. I mean, it's just some really awful, misogynistic, sexist commentary. She doesn't call it that. I call that that. Even the Premier's wife, has ostentatiously blocked her on Twitter. I mean, I watch these press conferences. She is not political, right? She's straight down the line reporter. Her questions are tough. They're polite. They're forensic. But she's whip smart. And she said to me last night that she's not going to change. You know, she's not going to hold back. This is a new low, isn't it?
It is a new low, and I've got all the time in the world for Rachel Baxendale. A couple of weeks ago, I sent her the Les Murray, the poet's quote, that nothing a mob does is clean. When Twitter started to pile on her, she is a class act. She leaves... None of us know Rachel Baxendale's politics. She does her job. But here we are in an era of social media where everything becomes so emotional. We need journalists to ask probing questions of the politicians we like and the politicians we don't like. That is what she is paid for. She is dispassionate. She is fair. Keep going, Rachel Baxendale.
All right, Jane, I've got a lot on the show tonight. I want to get next week, get you on to talk about what's happening in the media market in WA, because it looks like there is an agenda being run, but we need a bit more time for that. Thank you as always. Great to see you.
Thank you for having me, Peter.
All right, don't forget, you can catch more of Jane. You love her. I know you love her. Jane Marwick Show. It's on iTunes. It's a podcast. Head there and pick it up. And as I said, more of Jane is always a good thing.